Kia ora, Year 12s and Year 13s if you have to be watching. I'm just going to do one more video. I felt like this is like a blog and I'm posting. So I just wanted to put, I'd skip ahead because I'm going to teach this later in the week and then you can watch it then. New Zealand exporting. So 2-country model for trade, and my earlier videos and in class we just focused on us importing. So the other side of the story is if you open up for trade, you can export, or we can in this case. So I've picked a product that's fairly logical, and that's beef. So cows eating the meat. Sorry, vegetarians. So you may be aware that Japan has, I think it's called Wagyu beef, and it's made in Japan. They like to protect this industry. It's, I don't know, fed, is it fed? It's fed like grain or something, and it's quite marbly, and they've got like the taste, that type of thing. So it's quite protected. But New Zealand's quite good at producing beef. Nice tasty steaks to eat, and we are trying to sell Japan more of our steak because they quite like it. But Japan is kind of resistant to letting us trade beef because they want to protect their own industry. And we'll discuss that more when we get to free trade. But for today, I just want to go, okay, why would Japan and New Zealand trade? Again, this came in beef. And why would it lead to a situation where New Zealand should export to Japan and Japan should import? All right, and then I'm not going to do impacts. I just did one on that. You could have a go at figuring that out yourself. Maybe later if I have time, I'll go through it. Not today. So we have the 2-country model. Just a point, they do need to be drawn side by side. You can't draw one above the other. It doesn't work like that. Okay, it must be 2 models side by side. Okay, again, we assume they can only trade with each other and that the prices, there's no need for exchange rate. So it's just like price, you know, same price, not the same price, but same currency, if you like, and this is quantity. So I've drawn up the 2 models and I've already put in the pre-trade price. So it's like, oh, they're side by side, but they're not trading with each other. And if we had a beef market in New Zealand, this would be the price, it's quite low, and this would be the quantity sold. Whereas in Japan, they're all on their own, they're not trading. This would be the pre-trade price in Japan. So this is how much you pay for beef in Japan, no trade. And that would be how much it is sold. So it's really important to make sure you put in the pre-trade prices because it gives you the context of why the 2 countries trade, but also when we talk about the impacts of trade, what happens to, say, consumption and production in both countries, and what happens to the price, most importantly. So in this case, the basis or the cause of trade is that New Zealand is what we call a low-cost producer. Okay, you can see that here, that we are low cost because our equilibrium price is really low. Okay, so that means that we must be able to produce it quite efficiently and for a very cheap price. So PNZ is less than PJ. Okay, and that's because they're a high cost producer. Right? So it's kind of saying that look, Japan is very good at many things, but maybe not so good at producing cows to eat. And if you kind of think that logically, we have a lot more like land and pasture to have cows, and they don't have that much available land, so that kind of makes sense. So yeah, so why should we trade? Well, our price is lower than yours, so New Zealand producers get a bit of Googling. Oh, if we were to sell our beef to another country like Japan, we could sell it for a much higher price than we're getting at home. Even if I factor in the shipping costs of shipping the beef to Japan, it's still a much higher price. So this would be quite profitable for me to do so. I forget what New Zealand consumers are thinking. We leave them out of the equation. Whereas Japanese beef consumers are like, that New Zealand beef is quite tasty. And I noticed that that's the price of beef in Japan. It's very expensive. What if we were to trade with New Zealand? We could get the beef for a lot lower and it'd be a lot more affordable for us. So how about we get the 2 countries to talk and we sign a free trade deal, and then we can trade. Let's say they make a proposal and they use this model and they're like, okay, we propose that we have a free trade deal and we trade because New Zealand has a cheaper price than us. We reckon that, you know, obviously if the price in New Zealand was to rise, like with trade, then that's going to create like a surplus. So New Zealand could export their surplus beef to us because when the price falls for us, we're going to have a shortage, so we could import it. We could import from New Zealand to meet our shortage if the price was higher. And so, as I said, there'll be like, you know, obviously free trade deal, so we can actually do this. There's no tariffs, there's no artificial barriers, and then like producers here, the consumers here, you know, representatives get together and they find a trade price. And the deal with the trade price is that our surplus we have a price rise, okay, above that equilibrium, is going to have to be equal to the shortage because we can't trade with anyone else. So where we have surplus to requirements has to be purchased by Japan. Otherwise it's beef, it would go off, so it has to go somewhere. So that is where the shortage and surplus thing comes in. And so basically, you know, there would be some negotiations of different price, what about this, that kind of thing. And you're looking for a price, and I'm just kind of drawing it across, you know, I'm really just having a bit of a punt here. Let's say like this, where it's probably a little bit not straight, I totally recognize that, but let's go that this is the trade price here. And I'm looking where a price of trade, and I'm going to call it PT because that's the most common thing to call it, is our surplus. So as the price in New Zealand rises, we can see that the quantity demanded will fall, okay, because it's now more expensive. The price is rising with trade, whereas the quantity supplied increases because now it's more profitable with trade. So that causes a surplus, which is normally not good, but we don't need to return to equilibrium because we can export the difference. Okay, so you've got that whole scenario of prices rising here. In this case, it's falling. So as the price falls in Japan, their quantity supplied, their local production of beef will decrease because it's now less profitable. So they'll decrease their production, whereas the quantity demanded by Japanese consumers will increase. I'll put a J for Japan and Z. Sorry, just interlude. The quantity demanded by Japanese consumers is going to increase because it's now more affordable to eat New Zealand beef because the price has dropped with trade from PJ to PT. So again, when price falls below the equilibrium in a market, that would normally cause a shortage, but that's okay because we can meet that shortage with imports from New Zealand. And again, we're using very clever economic letters or symbols, if you like, X and N. X marks the spot, N for imports. So what do we see? New Zealand is exporting our surplus to Japan to meet their shortage. And we do need to find a trade price where the amount of beef that is in surplus in New Zealand at that price is equal to the amount of beef that is in shortage in Japan. Because neither country can go to another country to trade with, we're assuming they only trade with each other. And that is a really big assumption, but that's how this model works. And it's just really trying to show you why two countries would trade, looking at the difference in price between the two countries. And then it's looking at what happens when they trade. And it's looking at the idea that with New Zealand exporting beef to Japan, our local consumption will decrease because now we have to pay that trade price, which is a lot higher. So it's more expensive, and so therefore there's less sold in New Zealand. Okay, so this is the amount that's sold in New Zealand. Whereas the actual amount that's produced in New Zealand increases from QNZ to 0 to QSNZ, and that becomes produced in NZ, and the amount that's labelled X is exported. So you can see things like that. All right, you can talk about that's not good for them because they're having to get less beef and pay more, whereas it's good because they're making more beef and they're selling it, making more profit and revenue. And that's not necessarily bad for us all because they could hire people to work for them, which creates jobs and that creates more income, and that can spin off to other effects in the economy. Over here though in Japan, the amount that's actually sold, the amount that's produced in Japan is going to fall to just this amount here, 0 to QSJ. So that's what's produced in Japan. Whereas from here to QD Japan is what is consumed or sold in Japan. Because the Japanese consumers consume the production in Japan, right, this amount, and they fill that up with imports from New Zealand. So that is very briefly the two-country model of trade, looking at New Zealand exporting. Hope that has been helpful. Again, I recommend you watch it, pause it, and use it to help you complete, say, a workbook exercise, or maybe later, next term, you could be using it to explain why you think New Zealand should sign a free trade deal with Japan. We quite like to. We haven't quite got like a full free trade deal. The TPPA is kind of, or CPTPA, whatever it's called, as a partial free trade agreement. Okay, so I'll see you back in class.